Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Private Ashley Chivers. We warmly welcome the family of leading seaman Edward William Franklin, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this service across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed at the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who've given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to leading seaman Edward William Franklin. Edward Franklin was born on the 11th of August, 1916, in Brisbane, Queensland, likely the only child of Henry Joseph Franklin and Maud Annie Jones. Little is known of his early life before Edward enlisted in the Royal Australian Navy in Sydney on the 27th of May, 1934, for a period of 12 years. Initially undertaking training at HMAS Cerberus in Victoria, Edward was rated as an ordinary seaman before being promoted to able seaman in April 1936 while serving on HMAS Sydney II. He served and trained variously in HMAS ships Canberra, Penguin, Brisbane, and Stewart. Edward is thought to have married Merle Jean Franklin of Macquarie Fields, New South Wales, on the 21st of August, 1937. When the Second World War broke out in September 1939, Franklin was serving his third tour in HMAS Canberra, but transferred ashore for training and promotion to leading seaman in May 1941. In August that year, he rejoined HMAS Sydney. During 1938 and 1939, up until the outbreak of the war, Sydney was operating and training on the Australia Station. Already based in Fremantle in preparation for hostilities, the vessel commenced the war with gunnery training and escort duties off the coast of Western Australia. Returning home to Sydney for docking and Christmas respite in December of 1939, the new year saw the ship return to operations based out of Fremantle until they were directed to undertake operations off the Australia Station, joining the Royal Navy Mediterranean Fleet in Egypt on the 26th of May 1940. Sydney and her crew operated with distinction, undertaking many celebrated actions, including the sinking of Italian cruiser Espero and the Italian cruiser Bartolomeo Colleoni, the Battle of Calabria, and the Battle of Cape Spada, of which Rex wrote in his diary, held in the 8 Australian War Memorial collections. HMAS Sydney returned to Australia in February 1941 to much public celebration and acclaim, but the respite did not last long, and Sydney returned to patrol and escort task on the Australia Station for several months. Leading seaman Franklin rejoined the ship in August, and in late September 1941, they began operating off the Western Australian coast, escorting convoys from Fremantle to the Sunda Strait in the Netherlands East Indies. Arriving at Sunda Strait, Sydney would hand the convoy over to other Allied warships, which would then continue escorting the ships to Singapore. On the 11th of November 1941, Sydney steamed from Fremantle, escorting the troop ship Zealandia, carrying troops of the Australian 8th Division. On the 17th, Sydney handed the escort over to HMS Durban before commencing the return passage to Fremantle. On the afternoon of the 19th of November 1941, after months of reports of missing merchant vessels and intermittent sightings of unidentified vessels in the area, Sydney sighted what appeared to be a merchant ship some 200 kilometres west of Shark Bay, Western Australia, and closed to investigate. Sydney signalled the mysterious ship to identify itself while continuing to approach. The vessel replied that it was the Dutch steamer Strat Malacca, and at one point feigned a distress code to add to the deception, but could not provide the allotted secret call sign in response to Sydney's demands to confirm her identity. Sydney drew closer, relinquishing her advantage of superior gunnery and range, unaware that she was approaching the heavily armed German merchant raider HSK Comorin in disguise. Comorin had already sunk 10 unsuspecting merchant ships in the Indian Ocean and taken another as a prize. When Sydney was about 900 yards on his starboard beam, the German raider's captain, Theodor Detmers, ordered the immediate hoisting of the German battle ensign and opened fire with guns and torpedoes. Sydney returned the fire in kind and in the ensuing battle conducted at point-blank range, both ships were badly damaged. The surviving crew of Comoran abandoned ship and the raider was scuttled. Approximately 3/4 of her crew survived to become prisoners of war. Sydney, listing heavily and ablaze from torpedo and gunfire, sank during the early hours of the 20th of November, 1941, with the loss of all 645 members on board. With no grave but the sea, leading Seaman Franklin and his shipmates are commemorated on panel 56 of the Plymouth Naval Memorial, England, among thousands of others with no known grave, as well as on the Carnarvon and Geraldton HMAS Sydney II memorials in Australia. He was 25 years old. His name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his memorial plaque is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember leading seaman Edward William Franklin, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They have no grave but the cruel sea. No flowers lay at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.